Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have not given a rest of season running backs ranking video in quite some time. Obviously, we have some big-time risers. I'm going to be excited to rank guys like Josh Jacobs, Rashaad Stevenson, but on the other hand, we have some players plummeting down these rankings like Dameon Pierce. But before we get into anything, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down there in the comment section. And in that comment section, you can find a link to Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, you can check out all these cool player props. When you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit, dollar for dollar, up to $100. And only with promo code FLOCK are you going to get access to this special Patrick Mahomes line. I could not be more proud of this. We worked our butt off to get it for you. So please make sure you're taking advantage. Sign up now. That will show up to you on Friday. But I think that should be it. Quick little side note. Maybe I like the Gabe Davis more than 3 receptions tonight for Thursday night. But let's dive into it. Let's go running back 1, Derrick Henry. Now, with Derrick Henry at 1, I am taking into consideration here the fantasy football playoffs. Okay, I am looking at schedules, and doesn't really get much better than the Derrick Henry fantasy football playoff schedule because we know the Tennessee Titans are going to be a contending team down the stretch. That's something I really like about for the fantasy football playoffs. And on top of it, he gets to play the Houston Texans. I'd imagine Derrick Henry has 30 rush attempts for 200 rushing yards in that matchup where the Tennessee Titans should boat race the Houston Texans. And he gets to play the Los Angeles Chargers, who obviously have an extremely weak rush defense. Love the matchup for Derrick Henry. Love the fact that Tennessee's a good football team. I'm going to put him at 1 strictly because the fantasy football playoffs. Then at 2, we're going to go Austin Eckler. This will be for a full PPR format where actually right now, from a full PPR standpoint, Austin Eckler is the #1 running back in fantasy. So far this season, he has been sitting at 1. I'm interested to see what's going to end up happening whenever we have both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams fully healthy in this offense. I don't know how much that's going to eat into the usage for Austin Eckler as a pass catcher, but keep in mind, if the Chargers get to be a better offense with both those weapons in, maybe you actually have more touchdown upside for Austin Eckler. At 3, we are going to go with our guy, Josh Jacobs. With Josh Jacobs, if you look at our Week 13 rankings, he's #1 because he gets to play the Chargers. But his schedule's not going to be phenomenal down the stretch. At the same time, assuming that the Raiders lose to the Chargers this week, I mean, that's not a guarantee. I believe they're only, underdogs by 1.5 points. At that point, I think we could safely say that the Raiders wouldn't be playing for much this year. Now, that's not going to keep Josh Jacobs from going through and dominating down the stretch, especially in a contract year where obviously Jacobs playing for a lot of money at this point. But dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Jonathan Taylor at 4. Now, with Jonathan Taylor, it's been kind of a wild ride throughout the course of this season. It seems like he is fully back from the high ankle sprain. I can't put him in tier 1 though, just because this Indianapolis Colts offense is so damn bad. Or even if we go through and pull up what Jonathan Taylor did this past week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he gets there in a game where the Colts only had 17 points scored, but that's because he had 20 carries. He had the rushing touchdown. He gets involved as a pass catcher enough. I wouldn't say he's an Austin Eckler level pass catcher. I am a little bit concerned, however, that the Indianapolis Colts aren't a competitive team, and at this point, they're just playing for a draft pick. But a very competitive team is going to be Christian McCaffrey here at 5. Now with CMC, he is dealing with a lingering knee injury in his own right, but obviously Elijah Mitchell ruled out for the rest of the fantasy football season. So if Elijah Mitchell's ruled out for the rest of the fantasy football season, I think CMC really doesn't have any other choice but to expand his role in this 49ers offense. Now, keep in mind, we have to be somewhat concerned about CMC's own injury. Doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but don't know if you know this about Christian McCaffrey. He has an injury history. Okay, so I think we are going to have to be a little bit more concerned than we would be with most players. And also, we've seen the 49ers are willing to mix in secondary running backs, even if they're not named Elijah Mitchell. But going over to 6, we are going to have Saquon Barkley. If you look at our rankings this week, Saquon Barkley is way lower than this for this week in particular because he's going up against Washington. And we know that the Giants are dealing with so many, and I repeat, so many offensive line injuries. What's funny is the Giants are playing at home against the Washington Commanders this week, and they are supposed to lose this game according to Las Vegas sportsbooks. That kind of tells you the state of what you're looking at with Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants, but I think you will be excited about what we have whenever this team is able to finally get some healthy pieces back in this offense. But going over to 7, we are going to have Nick Chubb. I know with Deshaun Watson coming back in, a lot of people are going to think that, okay, this is bad for Nick Chubb because they're going to look to throw the ball more. And obviously, you have Kareem Hunt as the passing down running back. I don't really care too much. I think while, yeah, maybe they don't run the ball as much as they did with Jacoby Brissett and as much as they did with Baker Mayfield, even if they're a little bit more pass happy with Deshaun Watson, you're still going to see that the offense gets better. There may be more trips to the red zone, more sustained drives, and maybe that increases the touchdown upside for Nick Chubb. But dropping down to our next tier, we're going to have Joe Mixon here. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals running back room has accounted for 9 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. The Bengals running back room has accounted for 9 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. I don't even know how many offenses have given a running back 9 touchdowns this entire season. I mean, the main issue, though, and why we're going to have Joe Mixon ranked down here in tier 3 rather than a tier 1 running back, rather than a tier 2, is he arguably does have the worst fantasy football playoff schedule among all running backs. I think Joe Burrow is probably going to be able to elevate this offense to a point where it doesn't matter too much. So we still have to have him as that top 10 guy, but we can at least acknowledge the fact that it's a brutal schedule. Then at 9, we are going to have Kenneth Walker. With Kenneth Walker, we're giving him the tiebreak over Travis Etienne and over James Conner. All 3 of these running backs are extremely comparable for me. And the reason we're giving Kenneth Walker the tiebreak over these guys is with Travis Etienne, with James Conner, they're not playing in offenses that are really playing for anything this season. Jacksonville has no shot at anything. Arizona at this point has no shot at anything. Another reason we're going to have James Conner down here at 11 rather than honestly up there as a borderline top 5 RB, because that's what the workload's been over the past 3 weeks. I mean, James Conner has had the workload of a top 5 running back, is the fact that not only are the Cardinals not really playing for much of James Conner stubs his pinky toe on his dining room table. I'm assuming that they're shutting him down for the rest of the season. But on top of that, hell, you have him on the bye this week. And if we go through and think about how many weeks we have left in the fantasy football season, 13, 14 for the regular season. And then the fantasy football playoffs, 15, 16, 17. So I think Connor, you can move him up higher than this if you are locked and loaded into the fantasy football playoffs. But if you're battling it out for like a 6 and 7 roster, 7 and 6 roster, I mean, you easily have to take the running backs that are playing today. And then at 12, you're going to go Ramondre Stevenson. With Ramondre Stevenson, he has to be ranked as a running back 1. I have no other option. I thought Damien Harris was going to come in. Damien Harris is going to have a role. Obviously, Harris goes down with an injury. And at this point, Ramondre Stevenson looks like he is just a younger version of Alvin Kamara in New England. I don't think he's as good of a running back as prime Alvin Kamara, but still, the receiving down usage is just obnoxious. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we are going to have Alvin Kamara at 13. With Kamara, I mean, it's frustrating with how bad this New Orleans Saints offense is. Obviously, I mean, this is a spot where the Saints got shut out last week. I am hoping for some of our best ball teams, we get Jameis Winston in at some point this year. And honestly, from a raw entertainment perspective, I think Jameis would be a much better option than Andy Dalton if we're trying to have fun watching these NFL games. But just a tough spot for Kamara, declining running back in an offense that's really not doing much. And then at 14, we are going to have Dalvin Cook. I mean, with the Minnesota Vikings, they've been phenomenal. Like, it seems crazy to have Dalvin Cook this low, but if you're looking at a raw points per game so far this season in a full PPR format, this has been where Dalvin Cook's been ranked. This is where he's finished. I don't know why. I mean, you're looking at the Minnesota Vikings offense as a better unit than we've seen in a very, very long time. The production's clearly down for Dalvin. I think he's still that borderline running back 1, high-end RB2. And then at 15, we're going to have Aaron Jones. It's just all these 2017 drafted running backs. I mean, all these veterans that are talented in their own right, but for one reason or another, maybe you can view them as declining options. But now dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Miles Sanders, coming off a massive performance against the Packers. Miles Sanders with multiple rushing touchdowns. The Philadelphia Eagles currently leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns. If Miles Sanders saw 75%, 80% of the rushing touchdowns in this offense, he would be significantly higher than this. But we've talked about it for the entire year. The issue is you still have Kenneth Gainwell with the red zone role. I have no idea why they think Kenneth Gainwell is a running back that never deserves to play, except if they're inside the 10-yard line. Then, hey, Miles Sanders, come off the field. We'll get Gainwell in there. It seems like this coaching staff's going up against a team in fantasy that has Miles Sanders every week. And then also, we know Jalen Hurts is going to vulture those rushing touchdowns. And at 17, this is where it gets very difficult to make these rankings. I'm going to go with 3 running backs that are very, very comparable for me. We are going to go Dameon Pierce, David Montgomery, and Najee Harris. All 3 of these guys are very similar, in my opinion, in that they're all pseudo 3-down running backs. They have a 3-down skill set, and they can be used in that way, but they're not phenomenal passing down running backs. They're not Rashaad Stevenson. They're not Alvin Kamara. They're not Aaron Jones, but they will catch the ball a little bit. But they are all playing in disastrous offenses, and that's what's going to keep their ceiling low. That's what's going to keep them ranked down here as running back 2s. Obviously, with Najee Harris, we're going to have to continue to monitor the injury. But the reason Najee Harris is a big-time mover down for us is obviously the abdominal injury. The fact that the Steelers are stinking up the place, so they have no reason to rush him back. And Jalen Warren's back at practice. And then going to 20, we are going to have Jeff Wilson. If you wanted to put Jeff Wilson ahead of these other names because he's playing in a phenomenal offense, I'm not going to argue with you at all. I mean, I think, hell, you could very easily move Jeff Wilson up to 17 or maybe even to the very top of this tier. But that's why we're making this as a tier list, because I think you can always make an argument for a player inside a tier. I just want to make sure that we have the tiers set appropriately. And then at 21, we're going to go Tony Pollard. I thought long and hard about this as well, because the next tier is going to be very similar. I mean, all the same prototype of guys you'll notice, but I do want to take a stance saying, I do think Tony Pollard's still a better option than Ezekiel Elliott. You know this coming from someone who 2 weeks ago was saying to sell high on Tony Pollard because Ezekiel Elliott was going to have that role, but I don't want to overreact because what we had on Thanksgiving. And then dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Rashaad White and Leonard Fournette back to back. And then we'll throw Ezekiel Elliott there at 24 as well. We've been talking about this for a long time now. I think that this is a very comparable situation in Tampa and in Dallas. In that, yes, maybe as a fantasy football community, as casual observers of the game, we see the younger running back. We see the more explosive running back with Tony Pollard and Rashaad White. And we want to say, give them the job. They're ready. Make them the starter. These other guys can be the backups in Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette. Where in reality, that's just not how it works. I think you are going to have these split as pretty much 50-50 backfields. If I had to take a bet between Rashaad White and Leonard Fournette, I'm going to go White, but clearly it is so close. And that's why we have them ranked back to back, because I could easily see Leonard Fournette coming back from this injury and then going back as a starting running back in Tampa. And then at 25, we're going to have Jamal Williams. I can already hear you in the premiere. I know I'm guessing out a day in advance in the premiere chat where everybody for the past 5 minutes has been screaming, where's Jamal Williams? Oh my gosh, this idiot forgot Jamal Williams, clown. Like I get it. I understand it. With Jamal, he has been significantly better than this so far this season. Significantly better. Couple things. It's for a full PPR format. DeAndre Swift did expand his role ever so slightly this past week. DeAndre Swift had about 8 targets. So I am going to be hesitant to assume that Jamal Williams is going to continue to be a locked and loaded low-end RB1, high-end RB2 for us. I think that in a full PPR league, the usage as a pass catcher is really going to go away. And on top of it, I think that you are going to see a lot of these touchdowns just go down for Jamal. There's no way he continues to score touchdowns at this rate. But now going down to our next tier, we're going to have DeAndre Swift at 26. Like I said, we saw DeAndre Swift with a small bump up in his role this past week, and I'm not going to be surprised if it continues to expand. I'm not ranking DeAndre Swift as a top 30 running back in our rankings this week. You know, for week 13, you did not see him in the rankings, but I still think he's a talented running back. I still think he has the upside to be the running back 1 here. So we're just going to have to see how this plays out. And then at 27, we're going to go Isaiah Pacheco. With Pacheco, if you were playing in a non-PPR format, he would be much higher than this. Isaiah Pacheco would be much higher than this in a non-PPR league. But the issue is the man has 4 receptions this season. He's not involved as a pass catcher. When the Chiefs get inside the red zone, they have been looking to drop back to pass pretty much the entire season, pretty much since they've had Patrick Mahomes under center. Now, going to 28, I'm going to get a little risky here. We're going to go J.K. Dobbins. Now, let's also include Cordell Patterson, 29, Latavius Murray, 30. The reason I'm going Dobbins at 28 ahead of him is not because I think J.K. Dobbins is more likely than not to outscore these players rest of season. Like, if I actually had to bet $5 who scores more fantasy points rest of season between Cordell Patterson and J.K. Dobbins, I go Cordell Patterson and I don't even think about it. But if we're thinking of the raw upside of the players here at the very end, while yes, Latavius Murray, Cordell Patterson have significantly higher floors than J.K. Dobbins, Dobbins still does have a high ceiling where he's playing in what should be a very good rush offense. He's a talented player, obviously, due to the injury. You have to keep him ranked very, very low. Even if he were to play this week, which honestly, I'd be surprised if it did happen. I would say he can't be anywhere near your starting lineup. Dobbins would be very similar to Swift in that there's no way in hell that you could start him until we see otherwise. But I think that's all we got for you. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, please go down there, drop a like. Let me know in the comment section what you think we got wrong. And also in that comment section, you can find a link to Underdog Fantasy where you can check out all these cool player props. When you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. And only with promo code FLOCK are you going to get this a free Patrick Mahomes bet at 0.5 passing yards. I like that line, but that's only going to be available for people who use promo code FLOCK. If you signed up years ago to Underdog with a different promo code and you don't have the Patrick Mahomes line this week, I'm sorry. But I do like the Gabriel Davis more than 3 receptions line. I think that's all I got for you. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, and I really hope I get to see you in the live stream tonight.